Thank you everyone for joining us here at I'm Back at Work. I'm Mickey Feldman-Simon. I am the founder and CEO of I'm Back at Work, and I'm excited to have you here today with Eileen Exmeyer, who will be talking to us about interviewing tips to get the job. And before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody can navigate the webinar panel. So in front of you, you'll have the panel either looking expanded, like the image on the left, or closed up, like the image on the right. And to open and close it, you click on the orange arrow right up the top, and it will open and close. Now, you can also move it out of the way. We want to make sure it's not obstructing the view of the PowerPoint. So if you click anywhere at the top of the panel, you can just click on it and drag it out of the way. Now, at the last 5 minutes of the webinar, we're going to have a Q&A session where we'll answer any questions that you have. And to ask questions, you need to click on the gray bar that says questions, and then you type in your questions in the blue rectangle underneath, and we will address all of your questions. If you have questions you want to pop up along the way, I will be monitoring your questions, but we'll try and address everything at the end. So now I'm going to turn my video camera off so you can concentrate on the presentation, and I'm going to pass it on to Eileen. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you, Mickey. I really appreciate you having me here, and I'm excited to contribute to your community and this really important topic. So before I jump into interviewing, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself so you know who you're hearing from. So my name is Eileen Exmeyer, and I am the founder of Aspire with Eileen. So I am a holistic career and health coach, and I've been doing this in the Boston area for over 10 years now. So I have my bachelor's from Villanova in psychology, went on to pursue my master's when I knew I wanted to be a career coach, and I've worked at universities such as Northeastern up here in Boston, as well as Tufts University at the Fletcher School before starting my private practice. And now I integrate a more holistic wealth of opportunities in my practice after I completed an integrative nutrition training and a 200-hour yoga training, because I really believe that these two areas are so interconnected. So when we're happier in our careers, we feel better, we feel healthier. And when we are healthier, we are better able to thrive in our work lives too. So now I help people with everything from figuring out what they do want to pursue in their careers to actually feeling well and healthy enough to implement the strategies to land the work that they love. So I'm going to turn my video camera off now as well, just so that we can focus on the slides and dig into the content and the reason why you're all here today or watching the replay. So we'll get started. So our agenda, just for a little bit of housekeeping, is we're going to cover a lot in a pretty quick amount of time here. So first and foremost, what you should do before any interview. So this means whether you're interviewing, no matter what field, industry, job, which level, these are tips that I recommend everyone do. The second thing we'll run through is how to assess what questions you'll be asked, and then how to structure impressive answers. We're also going to cover the most beneficial strategy that no one wants to do, but it's incredibly helpful for your performance in an interview. And then we'll talk about how to follow up with employers. So that is our agenda for today. So first and foremost, how do you prepare for an interview? And just as a reminder, you can replay this video. So if you're in the job search mode right now and don't have anything lined up, just keep this in your back pocket, and you can always come back to it when you do get those interviews coming in. So now, what do you actually do? Some of these are going to sound a little bit obvious, but they are important to emphasize because I notice a lot of people get into fight or flight mode and get super stressed and excited when they get the interview and they forget about some of these details. So first things first are to find out about the interview day. Again, it might sound obvious, but what I mean is you want to know who you're going to be speaking with, what the length of the interviews are. If it's in person, you want to confirm the location and any logistics. So a lot of times when we get that email or that call saying we're going to be interviewed, we just accept it and confirm times, and then we think of these things later on. So keep these front of mind. Ask for these details, this information, because it's going to help you in two ways. One, the more information you have, the less fear and anxiety that will be present. So part of where that comes from is just the fear of the unknown. So if you know the people you'll be speaking with, it's just one less thing to worry about and guess about. And then two, it better helps you prepare for the types of questions you'll be asking in the interview. And even just when doing your research, you have a little bit more guidance. So first and foremost, find out as many details as possible. I actually had one client who had reached out for an informational interview, and then all of a sudden that became a real interview for a job that wasn't even posted. And then he was freaking out, wondering how he prepares. And I said, well, why don't you ask if they have a draft of that job description? And they did, and then he had much more information to prepare on. The second thing you want to do is learn as much as possible about the organization. So what I mean by this is really digging in and going farther than just the first couple of pages on a company or organization website, right? So Glassdoor is a fantastic resource if you haven't used it before, to learn more about the interworkings of organizations, what people actually think about working there, some tidbits from their insider perspective. And you can also use good old Google, right? Researching, seeing if they've been in the news, see what they're releasing about themselves, maybe publications, and really do a deep dive here. And this will help you in two ways as well. The first way is that you can integrate some of these common themes that you're noticing come up in the way the organization is talking about themselves in your interview answers. And then the second way is you will be able to bring this up and show all this research and homework that you've done when you're asking questions to the interviewer at the end. And we'll talk about that in just a few moments. The third thing before you're even in the interview is to know your application materials like the back of your hand. So for many people, you're going to have some positions on your resume that are older. And older doesn't mean 10 years ago for everybody. It could mean 10 months ago. But when you are actually in interview mode, you need to be able to speak to every bullet on your resume as if it was something that happened yesterday. And this is a common thing that I see people struggle with, is articulating what they did and then also connecting it to the role at hand. So if it's been a little while since you had that experience, do a walkthrough on your own, and for every line, go through and actually refresh your memory on what you were talking about in that line on your resume. And the reason why, just as one more note there, that you want to do these things with your application materials is because there are clues here. So there's something in your resume, something in your cover letter, something in your writing sample that has led the employer to want to have a conversation with you. So you want to start with those clues before going into anywhere else, because you know that something in there has caught their attention and they want to learn more about it. So that's the best and most strategic place to start. Now we're moving on to how to actually think about and figure out what questions you'll be asked, and then how do you make your answers strategic and impressive. So when people are going into interview mode, many, again, just jump into this, okay, I'm in interviewing, what do I do? And they miss the clues that are right in front of them. So first and foremost, look at the job or the internship description for which you are interviewing for. So instead of Googling what are common interview questions, this is your starting point, because you can dissect or break apart a job description to really get clarity on what is important to the employer and what they would be asking you about. So you can go through both the way that they've described the organization, the way they've described the role, and then the way that they're talking about the qualities or skills they're looking for. Notice themes and then turn those themes into questions. So if in 3 different ways they've talked about it being a really fast-paced environment with a lot of changing parameters, then you're going to know, okay, if I've worked in that type of environment before, I need to emphasize this about myself. So start there and then do your research. So Glassdoor is another great resource. You can also take a look on different career services websites or coaching websites to see what are some common interview questions. The Muse is another good resource. And from there, go into brainstorming some other potential prompts, but start with the job description, then look at the more common interview questions, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Now, I mentioned before, we're going to cover one of the most beneficial strategies that no one wants to do, and that is practicing out loud. So once you've come up with some questions that you anticipate being asked, what a lot of people do is they either jot down notes or they think through in their minds, okay, these are the couple of things that I would say or focus on. And that's it. They just kind of have a rough idea or outline. Now, the way that we think we're going to sound or answer things and how it seems in our heads often translates very differently when it actually comes out of our mouth. That's just the way that we work, human nature. There's kind of a disconnect sometimes. So practicing out loud may feel a little weird. You can do it by yourself. You can find a partner or a friend to actually be a sounding board and practice with you, or a coach like Mickey or me. But you really want to go out of your comfort zone and take this little extra step, and I guarantee you, your performance, the difference will be night and day. Because then you stumble on your own or with that trusted person, and you'll notice that there's some things you need to rework or that aren't as clear when they come out loud, and then you're less likely to do that in front of the employer. The third thing you want to do that I notice a lot of clients skimp on or just don't really give much attention to, not even purposely, is preparing the questions rather to ask their interviewer. So many people go into this and just think, okay, I'll ask about next steps and what they like about working at the organization. And those are definitely important questions, but you're missing a fantastic opportunity here if you don't use this part of the interview to leverage all of that research, all of that homework that you've done. You want to have at least one or two questions prepared that are basically an excuse to show how much research or homework you've done. So, for example, if you were doing your Googling and your news reviews about the organization and you noticed that there was a press release about a prospective partnership or collaboration, you could ask a question saying something like, I noticed about 5 months ago that there was an article talking about a potential collaboration with X, Y, and Z company to serve these clients in a different way. Is this something that is still in the process of happening and coming to fruition? And would this role be someone who would engage with that process? So you worded a little more eloquently than I just did, but basically use that as a way of showing them you know what they're up to, you've done your homework, and you're actually envisioning yourself in the role. So over-prepare the number of questions you have, keep one or two that are excuses to show your homework has been done, and you will leave the interview on an impressive note. So those are three of the most important things to do in anticipation of your interview and to really craft strategic answers. We're going to go through next those common interview styles because this is a nice framework for you to understand how to anticipate certain questions and then accordingly really strategize what answers make sense for you to share. So these are the most common ones that we see. Behavioral or competency-based is one of them. So many people think they haven't had this type of interview question before or they're not sure what it is, but it's really any question that starts with a tell me about a time when you, or describe a situation where, ... So it's asking about a previous behavior of yours. And that's because the theory is that our past behavior is at least 50% predictive of our future behavior. So when you're thinking of these questions, it can be a little challenging for many people to not ramble, to not go on, because they struggle with thinking about, okay, how much context do I give a person? How much information is really important? It was a group, situation. How much do I talk about the group's action versus my own? So this is a model you can keep as a framework or kind of a checklist to ensure that your answer is complete enough, but not going on. So some people call it PAR, problem, action, result. This acronym is STAR. What was the situation or task? What action did you take? And what was the result or the anticipated or intended result? Now, one thing to keep in mind, and I'll give an example, is be mindful here. If you're giving an example that is talking about your team or a group situation, make sure that you and your own actions don't get lost in this answer. So the employer wants to know about your performance in particular. So if you're sharing a team-based example, make sure you say, the team was working on X, Y, and Z. I proactively did, and whatever it is, so that you can delineate between the team's results and your actions too. So an example of a STAR, so a question might be, tell me about a time when you worked well under pressure or managed a stressful situation, right? That can be a common behavioral-based question. Their answer might be something like, for me, I would say something like, in a previous role, when I worked at Tufts University, I managed our DC career trip, which was 75 events in just 2 days for over 300 people. Now, one year, we were traveling in February and there was a severe storm, and over half of the flights for the students were either delayed or canceled. So I was in a situation where I had to decide whether or not I would impose the career trip violation rules of missing meetings or let people move forward in an understandable way of missing meetings. So I communicated very clearly to the students that they should try their best to still make it in whatever way that they could to their meetings if applicable, but that I would communicate with the employers that there would be some no-shows due to weather. So that's a super quick example, but you can see I quantified, I gave a good sense of what the context was, and the end result was that there was clear communication and people were informed of what was happening. So this is your cheat sheet for any of those behavioral questions to really make sure that you're covering as much information in a succinct way as possible. Another style of interviewing questions that's very, very common is conversational or fit. So these questions will feel much more casual or just really, informal. And the reason is because it's the employer trying to get a sense of you and your personality and whether or not you would be a good fit for the team. So we spend so much time with our colleagues and in our work that this is a really critical area people often focus on because they want to work with people that they want to be around, right? So these are typical questions like the ones listed here, but it might also be something like, what do you like to do in your spare time? What do you do for fun? And those can feel really unrelated to this, but again, come back to really thinking about what the intentions or the objectives of the employer are, and it's to get to know you and whether or not you would be a fit. So I had a former colleague who would call this the Phoenix test. So she was in a role where she had to fly to Phoenix a lot, and it was basically, do I want a colleague who I would want to sit on a plane and fly to Phoenix with? That's a really short and sweet way to think about what is an umbrella of line of questioning that employers might ask you. So the key here when you're answering the one about strengths, just a quick note, is you are going to have many strengths, and you want to think strategically about what strengths matter most and are most relevant for the position at hand. And that's something to keep in mind for any interview question. The more you can tie it back and prioritize what is most attractive to that employer, the more impressive of an example you're going to give to them. The last common interview style that I'll cover today is job-specific interview questions. So these are basically like they sound. They are specific to the role at hand. So if you're applying for a technical job, it might be something that is a very technical question, right? So if you would have to use some strong analytical skills, they might give you an actual case or scenario where you have to show your technical acumen. If you have said that you're fluent in a foreign language and that's an important part of the role, they may just start and shift into speaking in that language to ensure that you do have the proficiency level that you shared. So this is just a nutshell way of saying they're going to break down the specifics of the role at hand and see how you can articulate your ability to do those tasks or to have that skill set. So again, no matter the style here, you always want to think about how you can tie things back to the position at hand and what examples of the many you might have demonstrate as completely as possible to the employer that you could do this job well. So in your prep work, I recommend jot down a whole laundry list of what examples you have and then really prioritize which ones you want to seek out sharing and finding a way to bring up in your interview. The next thing I want to just touch on is managing your stress, right? So many people, one of their biggest things that they're afraid of is this type of situation, is having to perform, having to talk about themselves, and having to feel like they're selling or convincing employers to onboard them. So what I like to focus on with clients is managing this stress, because when we're in this state of heightened stress and nerves, we may not perform as well as possible or show up as our real authentic selves and really demonstrate to our full capacity what we could bring to an employer. So focusing on mitigating the impact of stress can be a really nice thing to do when you're in interview mode. So as much as possible, sleeping, and I know that might sound obvious, or if you're someone who has trouble sleeping when you're stressed, you might be rolling your eyes a little bit, but if you know your interview isn't until a couple of days, then maybe you prioritize adding extra sleep the couple of days before, knowing you don't sleep as well the night before, right? So there's a couple of things you can think through to prepare yourself as possible for interview day. If you have a day where you're interviewing back to back to back and there's no lunch break or anything like that, really thinking about how you're fueling your body. So are you eating breakfast? Are you bringing a snack in your bag so that when you can catch a little break or run to the restroom, if you know your energy dips, that you've got that and you can still have the energy to perform well and engage with employers as best as possible. The number one thing that I think you can do is to breathe deeply. So it sounds super simple, but it's science. There's this nerve called the vagus nerve in your body, and when we breathe deeply enough that our diaphragms expand, so our bellies expand, we are tapping into that nerve, which activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which basically just means we get out of fight or flight mode and our body is saying, hey, you can rest, you can digest, you can be your real self and not be in this kind of heightened state of stress. So you can do this in your car, you can do this on the subway, you can do this in the lobby as you wait to be called in for an interview. And I guarantee you, just this simple exercise will help you to mitigate some of that stress response. So the last and not least is how to follow up. This can be a tricky area for some people. So a couple of things to think through are no next steps in the hiring process. So ask questions. One of your questions you should ask is, can you tell me about the rest of your process or your timeline for making decisions? This is super helpful for your peace of mind. So if you hear from them that someone's going to be on vacation and the decision maker is out for a while and they're not deciding for a month, then you won't start to freak out and think, oh man, something's wrong or I didn't get the job if you didn't know that information, right? So ask about that. And that's going to help you know when to do follow-up too. Grabbing business cards, another little thing, but it can save you a lot of headaches. So asking for this at the end, either directly with the people at hand, or if there's someone at the front desk that's escorting you in or out, asking them for the card so that you don't have to spend a lot of time figuring out people's email addresses. And then you'll be able to send personalized individual thank you notes. So if you meet with 5 people, you really want the position, you should send 5 individual personalized thank you notes. So recall something from the interaction with them that resonated with you, because they do swap notes very often. They'll send them to one another. And if you're just sending the same response, you're missing another opportunity to make a really strong impression and to show your enthusiasm for the role. And then you want to keep your contacts updated. So if they are saying that they're reaching out to references or they asked you about that at the end of the interview, update your references as well so they can be as prepared as possible. And then this one's a really important one as well. So if you get rejected for a position, which happens, and it doesn't mean that you weren't an attractive candidate, acknowledge that. You might you don't want to burn the bridge, and you want to leave the opportunity open for future interviews, future roles that come up. And this happens all of the time. I can't emphasize this enough. So having a graceful response and acknowledging your disappointment, but saying you understand. If they have any feedback they're available or capable of giving, you're very interested, but hope to be able to partner or collaborate or work together in the future. They can't always give you feedback. Sometimes it's for liability purposes, but it doesn't hurt if you're comfortable to ask in a very gentle way like that. But acknowledge either way and keep that professional door open. So that's a super ton of information in a really quick amount of time. But hopefully my intention for this was to give you a sense of how to really prepare as best as possible and know that about 90% of how you perform in an interview can be influenced or controlled by the preparation you do in advance. So really going through, even for a 30-minute phone screen, think of it as an in-person interview, because you'll be that much more confident and have that much stronger or more impressive answers for even that short and sweet phone call. And that makes you more likely to then end up making it to them in person. So implementing these tools, these strategies, both in terms of the questions that you're preparing for them, the questions you're thinking you might be asked, and then thinking about when it's appropriate to send those really personalized thank you notes, can all in combination make you just stand out to the employer and perform as best as possible in your interview. So I want to shift it over for those of you who are live, or if you have questions, if you're watching the replay, you're also welcome to reach out to Mickey or me. But I'll turn it over to you, Mickey, and see if there have been any questions in that chat box or anything. Of course, we can't cover all of the ins and outs of interviewing in such a quick time, but hopefully this covers a lot of those burning questions.
So I see some people are typing in questions, and as they are, I also want to talk to you about the I'm Back at Work community. And first of all, I really want to emphasize, treat the phone screening interview as important, at least as important as the regular interview, because if you don't get through the phone screening interview, you're not going to get to that next stage. Mm-hmm. So, and thank you, Eileen, for all the valuable information about the preparation, the before, the during, the follow-up. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the I'm Back at Work new community that we have created. Basically, we've heard from a lot of you that you would like more ongoing support. So we've created a closed Facebook group where like-minded women like you and coaches can communicate. We're going to have Q&A sessions with experts, with people like me and other coaches, where you can ask more personal questions, more general questions, anything that's on your mind. So, and you can also ask questions on a regular basis on the Facebook group. We are also going to have jobs that that we're going to post that are from companies that are excited to have women returning to the workforce be part and applying for those positions. We're going to make new connections, and 80% of jobs you will find through, people find through connections. So that's a really big part on widening your LinkedIn network. And we're also going to have materials that are exclusive to the members community. And Eileen is also going to be providing us with more information on how to answer the most dreaded interview questions, and that will be available to only the community. Now, keeping with the mission of I'm Back at Work, we understand that while you're looking for work, money is tight. The membership to the community is only $29 for 3 months, so that's less than $10 a month. So I hope you join us on that, and what you can do is you can go online to the I'm Back at Work page, click on the community to join us, and I will address your questions. So Annika is asking, should I approach a second interview the same way as the first interview, and where are the differences between the two?
Good question. You want me to jump in?
You can jump in and I'll add.
Sure. So like Mickey and I both said, I would prepare very similarly for a phone screen or a first round as any other sequential round. So doing exactly this, really dissecting the job description, really looking through and preparing and knowing all of your materials as well as you can, and then really digging into their materials, what they have emphasized about themselves. But the biggest difference between a first round or a phone screen and in person can often be the duration of time as well as the depth of questions. So often with a phone screen, they're really just looking to see, are you who you say you are? Can you hold the conversation? Are you interested in this role truly? And do you have this baseline level of skills that we're looking for, enough where it's worth the resources, time, and energy to bring you in person? So you might have a little bit more of the higher level questions. Tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in this role? Why are you looking to leave your previous organization? And then the in-person will be where they really dig in and get into more of the behavioral questions, the content or job specific ones too. But you never know, because it depends on who you're interviewing with. If it's an HR professional, it's often more high level. But if you're talking with a smaller team and it's someone who actually is understanding the work, they very likely can ask you some of those more technical ones. So I know that's not a fun answer, but you want to be prepared for everything. But those are often the most consistent differences. It's more kind of basic questions in the screen and then intensive in person. And I'm not sure if you want to add anything, Mickey.
Sure, and Annika, also I'm not sure if you meant sometimes there's the same company invites you for follow-up interviews, and I think the most important thing is to build on what you heard before. So if you heard them mention a few things, dig into it some more, ask some more, try and think what they were interested in, show that you have learned from the previous interview, and take that to the next step so that they feel like you're learning more about the company, you're learning more about the role. So your questions should be at a different level. What you're presenting that you can bring to them should be in some ways more customized to the position and what they're telling you about. Now, Amber is asking, Annika, if you have a follow-up question, feel free to ask. And Amber is asking, do you send a thank you note before they tell you if you're hired or not, or how soon after is appropriate? So Amber, you send the thank you note after the interview. And I think you should send it to whether you had a phone screening, whoever that you talk and interact with, you send a thank you note at every step of the way. And the logic behind it is you're building a relationship, okay? So see the thank you note of your way of emphasizing why you're the right person for the job, showing your enthusiasm that you want to continue with the process. It's good to personalize the thank you notes, touch on something that you talked with them in the conversation, but I really recommend to do it at every step of the way. Some people say wait 24, 48 hours. I am of the belief that it's fine to do it the same day. Some companies that I've worked with wait for you to send a thank you note before they follow up with you. They want to see that you're interested, and that's especially in sales positions. They want to see you do the follow-up. Eileen, do you want to add anything?
No, those are great points. I think the one other thing on the thank you notes is if you feel like this ever happens, and it has happened to me even before, if you ever feel in an interview like you missed or forgot something, or there's a great example that your mind just didn't come to, your thank you note can be a way for you to really delicately bring that into the conversation. So if they asked you about something and you forgot that you actually wrote a publication or have a report that you completed about that topic, in your thank you note you could say, dear whoever, thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with me about blah, 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 blah. I really appreciated your question regarding X, Y, and Z. And I should have also mentioned I have a recent publication where I dig into this subject in more detail. And then say something else personal from what they shared with you that made you even more excited to work there, and then thank them again for their consideration. So you want to be mindful to not be too in their face about it, but it can be a nice opportunity if there's ever a really big missed mark to include something that could help support your candidacy.
I completely agree. And I think sometimes it's also, let's say they asked you about a training that you did and you can't quite remember the name. That's an opportunity to say, oh, you asked me about the training, I looked it up, it was Sandler, anything like that. Mm-hmm. So one last question that we have is from Sarah, and Sarah is saying, I don't have an interview just yet. How should I start preparing now? And I'm happy to start answering that. And I think, Sarah, it's never too early. And the important thing to think about it, think of all the research and all the steps that Eileen just mentioned now. If you're going to be doing that the first time, let's say a day or two before the interview, it's going to be very stressful. So I really recommend even like finding the ideal company you'd want to work with, and doing a practice run and doing all that work in advance, trying to think and doing all the research, and also building all your answers to the behavioral questions. You can look online. There's so many articles about the typical questions that you may be asked. Start building all of your answers in advance so that afterwards you can just customize them to that specific job. Eileen, anything else to that?
No, I think that's great. If you're applying for opportunities that all have really similar skills that they're looking for, think about, like Mickey said, what are your best examples of demonstrating those skills? And then if you're noticing there's any gap in between which skills you have and which ones they're asking for, in the time that you're waiting, are there opportunities to work on developing those as well, so you're more likely to land the interview and move forward.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and I hope to see you soon at some of our other I'm Back at Work webinars, and I hope you join the I'm Back at Work community. And thank you, Eileen, for a great presentation.
Thank you for having me, Mickey, and thanks for attending or rewatching, everyone.